I believe that politics is the art of conversation.
I know that I just met you each one of you, and asked you where you drove out from, but I'm going to ask you to do it again. This is the first question. How has living in Washington shaped your political views?
I am black and white on many issues, and that would be where the Judeo-biblical values come into play. You know, I got involved in politics when my husband and I went to our son's Army officer commissioning. And when I saw my beautiful boy and his beautiful class stand up and pledge their very lives, their life. Now, I'm a mother. That's my baby. Pledging his life to the Constitution and to serve this nation and to total strangers, you know, because we don't know everybody in this country. And when I saw that, something happened in me. I came home and I prayed and I looked around and said, how do I get involved and what do I do in politics?
When I moved up here, I was living in California at the time. I was living in the Bay Area. I came up here partially due to the kind of like what I thought was like too far to the left, like political climate in California. I think taxes were a big part of that, right? Like I wanted to move up here, not pay income tax, just have like a more like a libertarian minded government is kind of like what I thought I would find. And that's not exactly what I found. The single party rule is really the biggest issue for me. We don't get a lot of diversity in thought is what I'm trying to say.
Surprisingly, it's galvanized my political beliefs. Essentially, fish out of water. I'm another conservative city boy, and love the city. I'm from the city, and I'm completely outvoted, even in Silver Lake in Everett.
Yeah, maybe it's because I'm younger, but I've also felt more like Seattle is a huge echo chamber. Even though I grew up in a very conservative, what I now sometimes call fundamentalist adjacent background, as soon as I stepped outside of that as an adult, I've likened it to politics hitting you over the head with a 2x4 all the time. And it forces me as a conservative and it forced me very early on as a conservative adult to decide that I either needed to figure out why I believed what I believed and whether or not that was correct, or I needed to be like the rest of the people around me, or I needed to bury my head in the sand and stop saying what I believed and hide. And I have a lot of friends that have chosen the hide option.
I think actually moving around Washington changed my political views. So I grew up in Olympia, which is, of course, you know, the capital of the state and a very, very liberal location. And then moving to Pullman, I started getting different perspectives and, you know, the reasons for their, you know, opinions and whatnot. And that started actually making me think more deeply about the demographics of the state itself. And I thought it was very interesting just how different people think just traveling 4 hours across the mountains, because they're completely different people when you start talking to them. And that actually made me more conservative, just like seeing why they thought what they did.
So I don't know how much of it is Washington, because I've been here a decade, a pretty formidable decade. I became a homeowner. I became a father. And so I don't know how much of it is, you know, me just becoming a curmudgeon-y old 40-year-old. I don't feel that old. But yeah, I think it certainly moved me. And again, I don't know, like, you know, I look at the Overton window, right, of like where our politics are today. And I feel like what defines a liberal or Democrat has shifted pretty dramatically. I feel like I've relatively stayed in the same place. I have a lot of the same core beliefs that I had 20 years ago around same-sex marriage. And, you know, generally I do identify probably more as a libertarian or independent now, because I think the government should stay out of most things that have to do with people's personal lives. And a lot of economic, social issues, I'd prefer them not to be as heavy-handed in as well. And I'm coming from Atlanta, right, where it's a bigger city. It actually has more homeless people. It has a lot of the same substance abuse issues that exist in every major metropolitan area. And I think they can just be handled in a different way. And I think it's been a big challenge in Seattle.
I feel like Washington is far more liberal than my home state of Michigan. And I felt like my liberal vote, my left-leaning vote, counted almost more in Michigan, if that makes sense.
in some ways, I feel safer being here, in the sense that, like, being first generation to this country, it feels like when, we were under the 45th regime, as I put it, like, I felt safe because, like, Bob Ferguson and Jay Inslee had our backs, and I felt like there wasn't going to be, they were going to, like, do what they could to really protect as many immigrants as possible. And so there was a sense of safety in that. There also feels like a lot of dissonance to me. Like, I think if we're really that liberal, how come there is such a huge wealth disparity? How come there's such a huge homelessness issue here? Where is our true sense of like care and like fiscal policy that could really help to change these social issues? So in some ways, I wonder, are we saying that we're liberal, but we're actually kind of libertarian at times? I'm not saying me personally, but I'm saying collectively Washington. I wonder about that.
I feel that we have an exhausting brand of liberalism in this state that knows what's best for you, and that's what we're going to do. And there's stuff like, people talk about we should do a mileage tax. That would be better. That would be more equitable. What about when my sister-in-law's got to drive 75 miles round trip from Westport into Olympia to get medical care for her kid? How's that equitable for her? It's just an example of, I agree with like the spirit of what we always are trying to do in the state, but the execution of it seems like it's what sounds good in 3 counties, and the other 36, lots of luck.
It's been a little bit of an eye-opener, coming into adulthood and realizing, that the rest of the world isn't as liberal as us. And I spent a summer in Ohio, and that was rather jarring. And just the fact that many parts of the country are still so segregated. And then, you alluded to homelessness, but also the whole just race is such a huge construct that's still very, very prevalent. And although we be liberal, we still have a lot of areas and issues that don't seem to have changed that much. So I'm not naive anymore about that.
How have you changed since your first vote?
I grew up in Boulder. Everyone was pretty much a Democrat in Boulder. I mean, that was kind of, it's kind of like Seattle. It's always blue pretty much. And as things have changed, I've moved very much independent, where now at this point, I really actually don't care whether someone is a Republican or a Democrat. I vote for people who are willing to, at some point, have changed a fundamental opinion at some point based on new information. And I look at my kids and I teach them, we teach them new information. You want them to make a new decision, but as adults or as, politics, you can't ever change your opinion. I just want to know as they learn new things, whether it's city council or as a senator or a committee, that they're going to be able to make a decision for the people, not necessarily just based on whether they're a Democrat or Republican.
Coming down here tonight, I thought I was going to feel like John McCain being the oldest person in the room. I think that my first vote was 72 for Nixon's second term. I voted third party instead of voting for Reagan for her first term, but other than that, I've pretty well been Republican all the way along.
I am a local transportation writer, so I'm involved very heavily in transit advocacy, and most of the people in those circles tend to be Democrats, of course. So I spend a lot of time with folks on the other side of the aisle, learning from them, giving my perspective, but having still kind of pretty steadfast views when it comes to conservative values. I think I've always remained a conservative, more so thinking through things independently, so I would align myself a little bit less as a Republican now, but I'm definitely still more in that kind of libertarian conservative mold.
I would say over time, I've become much more pragmatic in my approach to determining who I vote for and what represents the best vote in the place that I live. But I also moved from a swing district to a solid blue district. And so as a conservative, that has made voting much more difficult and much less enjoyable.
I've historically voted Democrat throughout kind of my life. I think the first presidential election, I voted for Kerry in 2004. And yeah, I've changed obviously quite a bit since then. I just don't have a lot of trust in kind of the Democratic Party. I think a lot of their principles have gone really far to the left, especially compared to like where Kerry and Obama were in 2008.
I feel like I'm disclosing a secret, but like I actually grew up Republican and I was a college Republican. I've had a transformative amount of change since then. Inheriting those values, like the belief system, a lot of growing up evangelical, fundamentalist, right-wing, conservative, South Asian, Pentecostal Christian, and having a lot of the values that come along with that. It felt like there was a lot of pressure to feel like in order to have faith, I had to vote a certain way. And that way of voting on abortion and gay marriage, just those things didn't make sense to me anymore. And so my life has changed when I have felt like we need the right to our own bodies and people need to love who they want to. And there's no sense to me in restricting that in any way. And it doesn't seem like a loving thing to do. And it doesn't seem representative of any kind of faith that I know of.
I was also raised conservative in a conservative Republican household, not a religious household, but very strong fiscal conservatives. And so I was proud to vote for George W. Bush. I also, though, just think my grandparents and my parents were conservatives in sort of what I still think of as the true sense of conservatives, which is making do with less, and I still let that inform my choices. So that kind of hasn't changed in some ways. But as my world expanded and my heart grew and I learned more, I guess my heart grew to encompass people beyond my immediate sphere. And that has really influenced my choices, especially environmentally, human rights, and that sort of thing. The environment is really important to me.
My first vote was for John Kerry. I was in college. I had the answer to everything. We were going to solve all the world's problems by getting George Bush out of the White House. I think I've just gotten more, I don't want to say bitter, but more pragmatic. I'm willing to make more compromises now than I was when I was a 19-year-old voting for John Kerry.
What's the number one policy issue driving your vote?
I'm very serious about safety, and I had my child back when he was 2.5 picked up a razor blade in front of the library, and we didn't go to the Burien Library for a long time because there were multiple campsites in front of it, people dying. We had like 3 dying a month. And so, although it's important to me, I realize that we're in a blue state. A lot of those things just aren't going to change. And so I guess I feel kind of disheartened that whoever's in, there's not a lot of incentive to change and to make big impacts.
I think human rights and solving human rights issues can solve a lot of the underlying causes of homelessness, of drug abuse. If we start looking at homeless people, we start looking at drug addicts, we start looking at mentally ill people as people and treating them as ill people and patients, putting them in whatever level of care they need to be in, rather than, running around giving money to the police thinking that they're going to solve it. I think that would solve a lot of the public safety issues.
In my neighborhood, which extends the far north end, 7 people have been murdered 6 blocks from my house. That's a lot, and most people don't know about it. They don't know about the nightly shootings that go from 125th to 90th on Aurora and all the side streets. I have friends who have bullets in their houses on those side streets. My family's been devastated by crime personally. I've had experiences with crime that changed my life. And I think that the Democrats have made a terrible misstep in allowing Republicans to seize crime as a Republican issue. Public safety is a human issue.
Number one is public safety, like Georgine said, is the number one purpose of coming together, forming a government, is so that we can all live in mutual peace with each other and thrive. I've come to realize that it's my responsibility to learn how to fit in society. And it's my responsibility to manage my own behavior to ensure that I don't break the rules and break other people's peace. And that's something that we need to teach our children from the earliest ages on up. Seems to be a major imbalance in which current policy over the last 10, 15 years in Seattle, in which certain criminal acts have been allowed to go on without much consequence. And ultimately, it is a two-way street, but it also starts with education from an early age.
My top one is crime and policing. I'll expand on that for a very short period of time. Then homelessness and drugs, then education, and then cost of living, which is basically taxes. So those are kind of my four. And then I think in terms of crime and policing, I think violent crime has increased. I think, I think I think Ferguson is to blame for that largely. That's kind of why I want to vote for Reichert. I think we are not locking up criminals. I think we are always trying to reduce the penalties for crime. I think they come out. I think there's recidivism. And then I think there's this interesting thing where we also reduce, there's some infringement on the Second Amendment rights, and we're reducing the number of police. So then it becomes kind of like what do citizens do who are dealing with crime, like either on their property or when they're out in the streets? And you do hear of muggings and attacks quite often, even in West Seattle, right, which is supposed to be a relatively safe part of Seattle. So those are kind of the concerns that I have.
Very locally, like for municipal races, my top issue is housing. There's an enormous anti-development movement on Bainbridge, and I would like to be able to afford a house. And so I am very concerned about the development planning and the type of people that end up on the city council and choosing people who do or do not allow permits and the type of permitting and all of that. On a state level, public safety is my number one, because as far as to my thinking, like, I could care about the economy more, but at the end of the day, I could care about housing more. But at the end of the day, nobody's going to choose to move to somewhere that has more crime. Nobody is going to choose to start a business somewhere that has increasing crime rates. That is the single biggest problem to me that underlies all of the rest, solving all the rest of them.
I'd like to see the state make crime illegal again. I'm not a stupid guy. I have a master's degree. I understand the recidivism argument. The whole point about if we just arrest people for petty theft, then they're going to do it again and again and again. And I've got to the point where I don't care anymore. What about somebody's right to be able to park their car and not have it broken into? What about somebody's right to be able to walk down the street and not have fentanyl smoke breathed in their face? I think we've done this experiment that has not worked, and it's time to let cops arrest people again. It's time to prosecute people for crime again. And is that going to solve drug problems? Is that going to solve everything? No, absolutely not. But I don't like that. My mom's car got broken into at the Marymore Dog Park. I work on a passenger vessel. Had a passenger roll on his 250-pound toolbox on the boat the other day because he was worried somebody was going to steal his tools while he was parked at the dock. This is not a functional society. We can't live like this. We need to have a little bit of law and order. And I'm torn though, because I'm not supporting Trump. I'm not a conservative. I don't want the Republicans in power forever, but This time around, it's crime.
I think that the regular person has been left behind too often. I am really excited to get to vote for Emily Randall in November. She doesn't take corporate money, and I think that's something that speaks very, very loudly to me. I think that a lot of the issues we're facing in Washington, and if you bring the lens out even further nationally, I think it all stems from those kinds from corporate investment in politics, which I don't think that should be how we vote.
Even though to me the environment is the most important thing, I want to leave my children a better world than the one I came into. And in some ways we have. I grew up with smog in Los Angeles, and that sort of thing. We know we can make a difference. It's so important to not lose hope, to know that we can. But all of these other things have to be tackled in order for us to get to the point where we can see beyond ourselves. We have to help each other and help the people who have the least in order to be able to focus on things outside of ourselves and make those smart choices.
There are 4 initiatives on the ballot. One would repeal Washington's recently established capital gains tax. Another would cancel the cap and trade portion of the Climate Commitment Act, the carbon auction that sells the ability to pollute to industry. The Washington Cares program began in 2023 and added a mandatory payroll tax to every worker in the state. There's an initiative that would make this tax optional. And then there's one that would prohibit the state from banning or discouraging the use of natural gas. Which initiatives are most important to you and why, and how are you planning on voting?
Well, I was a signature gatherer on all of them. And I'm very much in favor of these initiatives. I'm for freedom, I'm for liberty, I'm for government to stay out of my business. And this is just too much government overreach.
Inclined to vote yes for most of them. I think the one that I'd be more on the fence on would probably be the one around, the cap and trade one, just for 2 reasons. Number one is when it comes to issues around climate and environment, I'm certainly no tree hugger, but I would be more sympathetic to, progressive thinking on this. My posture toward that is really that, and as a Christian, I believe in the sovereignty of God. I believe that this, whatever happens to the planet, that God has everything under control. That being said, I do believe we're called to be good stewards of the planet as well. The second reason would stem from just kind of my sympathy toward cap and trade as a concept. I actually like the idea when Obama proposed it back in, I think, 2009. Mostly because this idea of monetizing that system and taxing negative externalities, I think, is really a good solution I think we should look at in terms of how do we deal with this issue of carbon and pollution while making sure that there is a system of incentives and disincentives for polluters.
I'm really torn on the climate initiative. I drive 120 miles a day round trip to my commute to work. I drive an old 4-cylinder gas car. The state has a incentive program where you can get an electric car subsidized, and the payment is only $160 a month to drive an electric car. I would be a perfect candidate for that. I make 11% too much to qualify. Because the way that we do these kind of things in Washington, we have to means test it, because that we want to make sure the idea of somebody who makes a little bit too much money getting some kind of public benefit is just abhorrent to us. So we have to limit it. And I'm frustrated that gas taxes are so high, and that affects people who can least afford to pay them. But I think, as others have said, I don't want to get rid of it. I think maybe the answer is elect people who are going to make it operate in a smarter fashion. So, undecided.
Yes, to pay less on all of them.
Amen.
Which one is most important is hard. I'm going to say that the natural gas ban is probably the most important one to me, reversing the natural gas ban and progress toward the natural gas ban, more specifically and accurately, because that's yet another increase in energy prices for enormous swaths of Washington.
Well, I just put a gas furnace in my house, So I really hope they don't ban that soon. So I will probably vote to make sure that I don't know. Don't know how I'm going to vote for that. I'm in Bremerton. A lot of houses are built in the 40s. A lot of houses can't handle a huge electric load. So that's another $30,000 to $40,000 to upgrade your house to handle a heavier electric load. That's out of scope for a lot of people. So I think that, again, if you're going to pass something like that, or in the future, if you want to do something like that, you have to do it in a smart way that brings everybody along with you and create incentives to make sure that people get to go with you on that. So I actually don't know how I'm going to vote on that one yet. I'll have to think a lot longer and a lot harder about that one.
I would say, for me personally, I would like to repeal every single one of them. And repeal the first three, and then, of course, ensure that people can have natural gas if they choose to. I currently have a grandfather that is in long-term care, and this would not even pay for a full year of it. It wouldn't pay for 1 year. So we're going to be paying this tax until we retire, and it won't even pay for a year.
I'm solidly no, and no. The two that mean the most to me is the capital gains one. Again, like no-brainer. That's like a no-brainer, and it's still a very small percentage of, because if you even have that, to be doing that, to have to pay that, you all right. And then the other one is walk hairs, and I think people get a little freaked out about it. To me, that's another one that's really important, but there's far too many people who are so not prepared that I think that it needs to go ahead and roll that baby right on out. Go ahead and take that little bit of money out, because there's too many people that are, especially young people, that think, oh, that's not going to happen to me. I need the money now. And then, no, they don't think ahead, really.
The other side, right, their campaign is like, just vote yes to pay less, which is a simple thing.
But they do that purposefully.
Yeah.
And so with these initiatives, that is one thing that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, is that when they write it, you have to really have known your stuff. And I find a lot of young people, like I have a 25-year-old son, and I find that a lot of young people really that's another thing that makes them not even want to vote, because they don't want to be on the wrong side of it. So literally, I'm like, okay, well, let's have a little Zoom party and let's go over the ballot so you guys can understand better, because it is. I'm 55 years old this year, and if it's confusing to me, I can't even imagine for a 25-year-old.
Who are you leaning toward for governor, and why?
I really wish that he didn't have the name Mullet. There are people who brand politicians and... But, I had a long conversation with him recently, Mark Mullet. I am very, very impressed. It's important to me that a candidate for governor not be an autocrat, that they listen to their constituents, that they listen to alternative viewpoints, that they not be arrogant. I am livid at the way that our Bob Ferguson has approached his constituents, and he's lost the state billions, particularly on the suit against the native tribes having to do with Indian fishing rights. I just think what he did there with that and Value Village disqualifies him to be a governor.
I think I put Bob Ferguson. I'm not sure about that one no more. I started doing a little bit more research. I was like, why is he so into the police? What are we doing? So I'm gonna change that. Whatever, if that ends up being the popular Democratic candidate, whatever, it's close enough. But that's how I really feel about voting Democrat anymore. It's close enough.
I'm tending to vote Reichert as well, just as a protest vote, because I think that a career cop would not necessarily be a bad thing in a state that is falling into lawlessness.
I'm going to vote for Reichert. I think, being a sheriff of King County, he understands, the needs of the state and kind of the criminal problems that we're having. I think he comes from a purple district, which kind of helps him kind of understand all Washingtonians.
Dave Reichert as well. I mean, I have long respected him since he was King County Sheriff. Just a really good record of service in Congress as well. I just, on a lot of policies, just can't align myself with Bob Ferguson. His views on abortion, public order, crime, those things, I think I would go for Reichert.
I was originally in the primary a semi-Bird supporter.
Yeah.
And so, because I am very conservative, and I really liked what he had to say. But as a Republican and wanting to help the Republican slate, if you will, I am choosing to vote for Dave Reichart and hoping for the best.
So for me, it comes down to, as a voter, I feel like I have responsibility to vote for the person that's most qualified. When I listen to the candidates, that Ferguson has a much better grasp of the overall issues facing the state government. And even though I don't think he wins the personality contest, I'm going to vote for him just because I think he's a better candidate.
St. Helens had a snow-capped peak the last time we voted for a Republican governor. I was born in 1983. John Spellman left office in 85 when I was still in diapers. I have been under Democrat rule my entire life. I identify as a Democrat. I lean Democrat. I have also lived in Texas, and I have seen what one-party rule does. And Texas has some of the laziest, stupidest Republicans because they don't have to try. And I'm concerned that that's what's happening to our state, is all you have to do is say the right liberal things and you win the election, and you don't actually have to make our state better. And I want to rattle the birdcage, and I want to give the Democrats a timeout and put Reichert in there for 4 years and make the Democrats try harder. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I also, as I said, crime is my number one issue this time around. I like the idea of putting a cop in there. My hesitancy, I am not concerned with Bob Ferguson taking my gun permits away. I am concerned with Dave Reichert taking my same-sex marriage license away. I don't know if I can trust the guy with my marriage license. So undecided, leaning Reichert.
I'm so sorry, but I just want to ask, what would Ferguson do to win your? What could Ferguson do to win your vote? I'm asking a follow-up question. Oh no!
Last night in the debate, he looked like a little wiener. He kept interrupting King Five's Joyce Taylor, demanding that she enforce the rules. And as she was trying to enforce the rules, he was interrupting her. It was just embarrassing. And Reichert was calm, cool, collected, explained things that he was going to do for the state. And Ferguson just kept saying, he likes Trump. He likes Trump. Trumpy, Trumpy, Trumpy. I don't care who the guy likes. I care what he's going to do for my state. I need to hear Ferguson say in concrete details, what is he going to do to get fentanyl off our streets? What is he going to do to clean up petty crime? What is he going to do to make gasoline more affordable for people like me who have to buy a lot of it? Tell me what you're going to do. Tell me how the Evergreen State is going to be better with you in the governor's mansion.
Ferguson, I really liked what he did as Attorney General. I liked how he did a lot for the Consumer Protection Division. He's gotten a lot of class action suits out there. He also sued the Trump administration 1 million times. He did a lot of really effective work in his position. And I think he went above and beyond. He didn't have to do some of that stuff. He took risks.
Ferguson as well, for a lot of the same reasons. And also I think he took pharmaceutical companies to task as well.
Yes.
But most importantly for me, ever since Roe versus Wade was appealed, a lot of people think we're safe here in Washington State, and I do not feel that it can't happen here. And so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm voting in people who will protect a woman's right to choose.
Which candidate are you leaning for president, and why?
Yeah, not sure if he'll be written on the ballot, but definitely Robert F. Kennedy Jr. A lot of things he stands for that I definitely like: against the big government, against big business, really for the environment, against big pharma. A lot of things that he stands for in that perspective that I like. And honestly, it would be really refreshing to vote for someone again outside of the dichotomy.
I'm not really leaning anywhere. There's all of the candidates are pretty awful at the moment, and it's Washington State, so I know we're probably going to go blue no matter what. So even if I vote independent or Republican, it won't make a difference really. So
I will almost definitely not vote the presidential contest. Okay. Donald Trump is not conservative. He doesn't seem to have an ideology to speak of. He follows whatever happens to be, whatever he thinks is going to be the most popular in the moment. And that is not a good way to govern. I am a small R Republican, not just a big R Republican. And Donald Trump is not that. At the same time, I am a conservative. And Kamala Harris is not that in any way, shape, or form. She's actually on a pretty far left end of the Democratic
Farthest
Party.
left.
And I absolutely can't support really any part of that. And so that leaves me with nowhere to go. And in Washington State, we have a winner-take-all electoral college set up, which means that my presidential vote is entirely overruled anyway, because there's absolutely no chance that Donald Trump approaches anywhere near 50% of the vote here. And so I feel no guilt about not voting at the top of the ticket.
Oh, yeah. I will likely vote third party for the first time because I actually think it is a moderating force in this election, which I believe is the first time. My brother voted a third party last election, and I thought he was absolutely insane. And how could he dare risk putting the orange man back in office because he lives in Georgia? But I feel like now it would at least just be a signal that we need to come together, we need to find a balance, and I believe the third party candidate is actually more representative of that point of view than the two parties that have just pandered to their primary bases.
We sit this one out, and not because I want to, but I do feel like this feels like a repeat of 2016, which I did sit out on the presidential race. I did vote for Donald Trump in 2020, a little bit begrudgingly, but I recognize a lot of the same qualities of that administration that many people here have talked about. I think generally my disappointment with him, of course, in addition to some of his interesting qualities as a person and his traits, as Elizabeth said, he really just has betrayed some conservative values. I do not think he's pro-life. I think he has betrayed free trade principles. I'm also concerned, and this was alluded to earlier, that the stuff about election denialism, I'm really not about that. My concern really is that, is this the best candidate we could have come up with as a Republican Party? I think a lot of Republicans feel like, but he executed. I'll give him that. But of course, I just really wish we were living in an alternate universe where there was I lived in a swing state, that it would be a different conversation.
I have not been excited about any candidates for president for a while. It was kind of a breath of fresh air that at least we didn't have someone who was in their 80s.
So I'm all right with Kamala Harris. Like I've been saying, I'm a leftist, so I don't expect any popular mainstream candidate to be into anything that I'm into. Because, I know I'm pretty fringe. Like, I have the self-awareness to say that. But Kamala Harris is, like I've said before, close enough. It's close enough.
When you're talking about a president, I want a policy where people tell the truth. And, I remember when Nixon lied to the country back in the early 70s, and my truck driver uncle was outraged. It was one lie. And we have a former president who almost everything he says is a lie. Mm-hmm. And to me, to me, that's enough reason. Aside from all the other stuff, to vote for Kamala Harris, because I'm not going to say she doesn't stretch the truth at times, but she tries to be honest.
Kamala for sure, 100%. When Black women do something, we rise and we bring everybody with us, and that's my personal history. And I don't think we get enough credit for that. So to me, this is the year of the Black woman, and it's definitely time for Kamala.
Proudly and enthusiastically voting for Harris and Walz. Prior to her becoming the nominee, I was going to cast a vote for Biden to vote against Trump. But now I'm enthusiastically voting for Harris.
I haven't voted for Trump in 2016. I didn't vote for Trump in 2020. I didn't vote for Trump in the primary. But I'm going to vote for Trump in the
good boy
in the general. But I'm going to tell you what, it almost doesn't matter, right? Because Trump's not going to win Washington, so like it's nearly irrelevant. Do I like Trump? Not really. Do I like his like I think he's a better governor. I think this is a referendum on Biden and Harris, though, and so that's why I'm voting for the Republican candidate, who is Trump.
I really had hoped somebody other than Trump would surface in the Republican Party, because during Trump's term, he was constantly under investigation, and that limited his effectiveness. Trump has emerged as the candidate. He did well in his first term. I'm voting for him this time around.
But I am unequivocally, enthusiastically, and joyfully voting for President Donald J. Trump. I think he is amazing.
For a third time?
For a third time, yes. And I was a delegate at the RNC. It was so exciting, and it was so uplifting. It was so patriotic. There was such a beautiful presence in the place, and it just gave me such a hope for tomorrow, and I'm 100% behind him. I think what he did in Roe v. Wade by appointing the Supreme Court justices is as much as a human can do. And I think his policies and his principles are America first, and I can't imagine anybody not wanting to be America first.
Have you thought about any reactions or plans if the election outcome is different to your hopes?
Well, the sun will come up the next day no matter what.
If it doesn't go my way, I'll swallow that bitter pill, but I'll thank God for my blessings, absolutely. If it doesn't go my way, I know policies are coming down the pike that I may not like. And of course, I've got to think to myself, how am I going to do my best to resist bad public policy in the most godly way I can muster?
Yeah, I mean, as a Christian, I firmly believe that whatever happens, Jesus Christ is still on his throne the day after.
Amen.
That's not going to change whatsoever. And I will certainly honor the results and respect whoever our new leaders are, even though I may vehemently disagree with, if the Democrats, if it's a clean sweep, certainly there will be some disappointment in the sense that, hey, we can't see some of our policy proposals come to fruition. As far as moving out of the state, I don't really see that as a thing. I've said before, I enjoy living here, and I don't want to go to a place where I am entrenched in an echo chamber. I've had a lot of really good friends move to red states the last few years, and they've had personal reasons for doing so. I'm just not there. I think I really want to be in a place where I can continue to engage people who are left and right of me and just have a really fruitful conversation about why we think about the way we do. And my two best friends they're pretty solid Democrat liberals, and I still have a great relationship with them. And so I really don't want to lose that.
I can't move out of the state because my children and grandchildren are here. And this is my home. This is where I'm placed. These are my roots. I'll probably have a mourning party. People come over and let's mourn. But tomorrow's another day. I get up and pray and thank God for breath, thank God for life, and just keep fighting. Can't give up. We cannot give up. And this state is worth fighting for.
Politics tends to be cyclical. I have hope that in the long term, this is just another cycle, and that there is great fight that can be had nonetheless at the legislative and at the local levels. And when people move out of state, we only become more likely to lose those fights. Things don't get better by fleeing. So I plan to stay. I don't have kids or grandkids yet, but kids are in the game plan in the future. And my husband and I have long since decided that they will not be entering public school, even though we live on Bainbridge, which has one of the top 5 schools in the state, because the progressive indoctrination is real.
If Ferguson wins, that's fine. I mean, I think he'll be a good governor. Be fine on that front. As far as president, if Trump wins, I am metaphorically going to go to war against Project 2025. It calls for the elimination of the United States Merchant Marine, to basically fire every American who works on a ship and replace us with lower paid foreign workers. It calls for outlawing a medication that I take every day. So I am going to direct all of my efforts into lobbying, letter writing, petitioning, protesting to stop Project 2025. I hope it doesn't come to that.
And I have not thought about any contingency plans. I do have friends who fled the country the first time Trump was elected. I don't want to do that. I do believe strongly I love America. I love our country, and I love where I live, and I believe in fighting for what you want from the inside.
Trump did win a couple years ago, and not all of us thrived, but we're all still here. We stayed, we made it work, and we fought against it. And I think when you can elect good governors, and you can elect good attorney generals, and you can elect your local representatives that truly like are much more, represent you a lot more granular, on a granular level. I mean, I think if we can get some of those things, if the election does not go the way we think it will, we might not be okay, but I'm not planning to go bail out to Canada or something. I don't know how you could abandon everybody. I think that there's a lot more hope than we realize, and I think that we all have a lot more fight in us than we know.
I live in Greenwood, and there's a lot of cannabis around, so I feel like I might just go for a little walk, and then I might come home and call some friends and cry for a while. And I'm talking about the president. I've learned from life is that I can handle the difficult stuff when it comes. I would rather it not, but that's why we have each other.
Both parties are always choosing the candidate for us either way. Whoever ends up becoming president, and I'm going to focus on making sure that we have open primaries in as many states as possible, and that we have ranked choice voting so that we all get an opportunity in order to get moderate candidates in that work for everyone.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to come out here and talk and share your honest feelings, even when they were different maybe than the rest of the group. That takes a lot of courage.